This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Billington CyberSecurity. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the user experience edge ahead for the Justice Department. A cyber buzzword battle breaking out in D.C. and the final grade isn't the point for the Department of Education. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The Office of the Chief Information Officer at the Justice Department says it's aiming for a better user experience for employees in its own office and across the agency. Melinda Rogers is the CIO at DOJ. At the Billington CyberSecurity Summit, she says she has two main focus areas on user experience.
There are two areas that's getting most of my attention these days on the user experience front. The first one is communications, and the second one is actually branding. So on the first matter of communications, once upon a time, and it's actually not that long ago, folks generally do not want to get alerts or notification about what IT is doing. We're usually sort of perceived as a nuisance. But the world is very different today, where everything we do is completely reliant upon the information technology infrastructure. IT is embedded in every functional area, whether it's administrative or mission operations. Just the slightest blip in our network could cause a wide-reaching impact, unintended, of course. But it's imperative that we, as the IT operators, make our end users aware of what's happening within our networks. Whether it's a small outage, localized, or a wide-scale outage, it's incumbent upon us to make sure we communicate out quickly and often with an update. Now, the challenge for us is to strike that balance between frequent communication and creating IT fatigue, right? But at the end of the day, with the experience of July 19th, where we had the massive outage, one thing we definitely learned from that experience is that consumers, our end users, really appreciated our frequent updates on where we are, even if it's not knowing what the root causes might be or when the remediation is actually going to fully restore service. But the fact that somebody is on the case, watching it, working it, I think that is very meaningful for our end user community. So that is something we're continuing to work on and perfect over time. The second area on the user experience front is branding. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. I came from the private industry, spent some time with Procter & Gamble previously, decades ago, but I think as we have become a much larger organization, not necessarily intentionally, but because IT has just become something that everybody relies upon these days. One of the things I'm trying to work on with my office is to level ourselves up, professionalize our services. Gone are the days where we're just the IT guys and gals where we run over to somebody's desk side to help them with individual support, but we are providing massive infrastructure support on the back end. So I think it's important for the CIO's organization to create an organizational identity, find a way to make our services memorable, hopefully in a good way, and then ultimately give our employees and service owners an opportunity to be proud of the services that they're offering and providing. On a tactical level, what we're doing on that front is we're updating our web pages, internal web pages. Most of my customers are internal to DOJ. I have very little presence outside of DOJ in terms of communicating or interacting with the public. But internally, it's about having a consistent look and feel in how we're presenting and describing the 30 or so IT services that my office provides for the entire Department of Justice, describing the benefits. And it could be something as a light of a lift of putting somebody's picture, a service owner's picture on the website so that we're actually putting a face to a name to a service. And it's about sort of bringing that full circle into our environment, making sure that our service owners can be proud of the services that they provide and own the good performances as well as the potential outages and have the ability to directly communicate with the customers. And I want the end users or our customer IT offices to come across a web page and be able to see, oh, that's an Office of the CIO product. I want to have standardized look and feel, white color scheme. So it's a whole body of work that we're embarking upon, and it's one that I'm very excited about and looking forward to catching up with you next time to tell you where we are in that journey.
I will look forward to that greatly. How do you get a sense of what your customers want and expect from you over time?
We have, at least at the Department of Justice, I have a monthly meeting with the component CIOs. Components are how we describe the various offices that make up the federated Department of Justice. The component CIOs are very vocal, but in a good way. They provide very clear, constructive feedback for us, and we make a point to take action on them. And a lot of times it does involve us working with our vendor partners to make sure that the component IT customers are at the table along with our vendor partners so that we are all on the same page in terms of what is expected, what needs to be corrected, and how do we continue to optimize our services.
You anticipated where I wanted to go to talk about that federated element of the Department of Justice, which is similar to other agencies, but has unique components as well. What does that mean, given that you have some 8 organizations that are focused on intelligence type operations, a lot of law enforcement, obviously, and others? How does that inform the way that you go about the customer experience piece and some of the other major parts of your portfolio, cyber and so on?
I think it's ultimately about customer engagement, getting the voice of the customer. That doesn't change. I remember that 20 plus years ago from my private industry days, and that very much applies to where we are today. My office is largely funded by components contributing into a revolving fund called the Working Capital Fund. So I owe it to my customers to show them how I'm spending their IT dollars and to make sure that I'm spending it in the right way that they want me to spend it. But also I have to spend it in a way that serves the department at large. Sometimes the interests could not be completely in alignment. And that's my job, is to make sure we bring the component IT's office's interests in alignment with the department. And I think it's ultimately coming down to relationship. We have to understand each other, communicate with each other, be direct, be forthcoming. Even if it's constructive, it's okay, it's business, but it's all about making it work in the end.
Every time we've spoken in the past, you've been very passionate about the people component of the work that you're doing. How has the emphasis on customer experience and user experience shaped the way that you're approaching the workforce issue? Either skills that you need more of that you didn't emphasize as much before, or job descriptions, or people doing things in certain places or certain quantities of work that's happening, any of that?
Very much an evolution. I think a lot of our folks started their careers as IT specialists, and they're still IT specialists. But as we have continued to professionalize our office and our organization and the services we offer, these service owners who are rooted in IT specialist background, they now have to expand their repertoire to include knowing how to manage money, knowing how much to spend on their contractors versus hardware versus software versus subscription for cloud services, knowing how to provide good customer service, getting that customer feedback, and also being responsive to customer demands. We are very much a customer-focused organization. We focus on achieving excellent customer service, and that's something that I've been incredibly proud of, how everybody in OCIO has stepped up to that. And I think that's something that is definitely learned and accumulated, a skill that's been accumulating over time, and one that is shifting as we continue to grow. And this is part of the professionalizing our services that I was mentioning, the brand management, knowing who we are, what we're here to offer, and also ultimately give our staff employees a sense of pride and ownership of what we do.
Beyond that feedback that you get from the CIOs across the agency, how do you know you're on the right track? What are the metrics that you're using to determine we're going in the right direction, or maybe in this one particular area we need to revisit, restructure, repivot?
Great question. I think on a metric level, as a federal government agency, we get lots of metrics given to us.
Yes.
And some of which we may or may not agree with, but we try to be good stewards, good citizens, and we comply with those metrics. Certainly, FISMA cybersecurity metrics is one element, but that is not necessarily the end all be all. We also have executive orders that have come down to require federal agencies to do X, Y, and Z. And one of the things what we try to be mindful of in my office, and also working with the component IT offices, is to make sure that not only are we being good citizens as a U.S. government agency and complying with federal mandates, but we also need to make sure we do the right thing by the Department of Justice. So what I mean by that is, for example, on the zero trust architecture journey, we have deployed endpoint detection and response capabilities through over 90% of our endpoint. And that's a statistic that I'm proud of. That's a technical statistic that is, yes, that is compliant, but that is something we needed to do. Unifying how we manage identities across our 160,000 or so users. There is no specific roadmap given to us other than we need to achieve zero trust architecture. That's the desired end state. So that is incumbent upon us to work with our IT customers within the Department of Justice to figure out how do we get there? What are the puts and takes? What are some of the things we can negotiate? What are some of the things that may not be negotiable? So it's about figuring out what is in the best interest of the department to make sure we have the technical controls we need. Hopefully those same technical controls will allow us to comply with federal mandates so that we're all in alignment and working very closely along the way with our IT customers so that they have no surprises coming from us on what we need to do next.
You can read more about user experience at DOJ on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, a cyber buzzword battle breaking out in D.C. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. The new TV show Better Contracting, Better Outcomes is available on demand now at fedgovtoday.com. You'll learn from top executives at NASA, DoD, Social Security, and more, plus industry experts that are leading government-industry partnerships. Discover their strategies for improving acquisition efficiency, achieving mission success, and driving innovation through federal contracting. Better Contracting, Better Outcomes, presented by the National Contract Management Association. Watch anytime at fedgovtoday.com. Welcome back. Technology leaders across government tell me discussions about cybersecurity and artificial intelligence aren't separate anymore. Those leaders are exploring how those two areas intersect. Troy Schneider is Executive Vice President and General Manager at Billington CyberSecurity. At the Billington CyberSecurity Summit, he says AI is a part of every cybersecurity conversation now.
Both in the presentations here at the Billington CyberSecurity Summit and in the hallway conversations, the same things keep coming up. At the risk of jumping on the buzzword bandwagon, like AI is woven into almost every cybersecurity conversation, both as a tool for how organizations can bolster their own defenses, and with the risks that come with those large language models and the processing power that AI brings to the bad guys. So that's one. The other is the data, which ties into AI. But you and I have been doing this long enough that big data was the conversation several years ago, and it was more about how do we gather it and figure out what to do with it. People are now figuring out what to do with it, and it's a tremendous resource for cybersecurity efforts to really just understand all the telemetry data, all the log files, and be able to bring that together in smarter ways. And then the third, which I really hadn't expected as much, is the collaboration. And you hear that across the federal space of CISO working with individual agencies, and always the conversations about government and the private sector working together. Those conversations are happening in spades here, but the different levels of government, the federal-state interactions, I was talking earlier today with the head of Germany's equivalent of CISA. The international collaboration is just so essential right now because there really aren't any borders in the cybersecurity battles. And so there have to be those open lines of communication and trusted relationships really with people at all levels of government and industry around the world, frankly.
There are two words that I hear here over and over again that I take a lot of heart by hearing, and those words are use cases. People are talking about how to do stuff instead of how to use stuff, as we've seen. You've been a reporter and an observer in this space for a long time. I imagine we could list 8, 10 different technologies over time where people have said, I want to go get that, right, instead of think about how to use something. What's the significance of that, do you think?
It's huge. First of all, it's practical that they're going to focus on the need, on the risks that they're seeing, the particular problems they need to fix. The other is just the reality that there is no single magic bullet technology in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not a particular task. It's a mindset and a sort of posture that you need for your whole organization. So that requires a ton of tools. And so not only do you hear use case over and over again of people talking about what they really need to do to address a particular mission need, they're also talking about how to build a toolkit. And no one here at this event thinks that they have the solution. They know they have a piece of the puzzle and need to work with others to figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing that's really encouraging, and to the collaboration point you made earlier, is nobody thinks that they have a box that somebody can buy and they're done.
Absolutely.
Everybody's talking about this both on the government side and the industry side as a journey.
And every once in a while, a company will come in and talk about, we have the solution for X, and everyone's like, oh, that's the new gay. Well, they'll learn, so.
What do you think people that are coming here should learn and go back to their organizations and apply?
Well, I think one of the things that makes the Billington events special is connecting those use cases and some of the real technical nitty-gritty with the larger national security framework. People are really talking about the strategic considerations, and then, it's not just having the CISOs work together, it's having their bosses, the secretaries of cabinet agencies, senior officials of the White House, understanding and taking this seriously and working with their partners. So it's a chance to learn at a higher level than I think a lot of the conversations that you and I have taken part in over the years. That's one part. The other is just the connections. The programming here is great. The collection of vendors who are participating is super helpful and informative, but it's those individual conversations that are happening in the hallways, that are happening after each session, that you see people like sticking around hours after the event are done to continue those conversations with people they've known. It's building that network so you can figure out how to work together.
Quick final thought, about 30 seconds left. One of the guests that I had during the time here said that that's what struck her as most important, is the government people come here to speak and then they stay to continue to learn.
I think that's absolutely right. And the level of participants that we get, both speaking on stage, but also just walking around, listening and asking questions, is really, really remarkable. And I'm just really honored to be a part of it.
You can read more about cyber and AI and more cyber buzzwords on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the final grade isn't the point for the Department of Education. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
Sure. So as we've seen over the last few years, generative AI has really kind of taken the world by storm. So everybody's familiar with ChatGPT. Everyone is trying at this point to figure out how do they integrate those generative AI capabilities into their infrastructure. So what we're seeing across defense, intelligence, commercial, civil, healthcare is how do we advance the kinds of things that Mark was just talking about? How do we do object detection, detection in signals, in audio, so on? Make those better, but then also leverage these generative AI techniques to then make sense of them so that we're, in addition to detecting what is in an image, we'd like to know why it's in there. Can we use generative AI to mine knowledge graphs that give contextual information to what's in there? Can we mine open source media to understand news reporting of why something's in there, what's happening? So how can we make higher level sense out of all of the information that we can then use those sort of lower level machine learning and computer vision algorithms to detect?
Welcome back. The Department of Education has another high grade on the latest iteration of the FITARA scorecard. But department leaders say getting a good grade isn't the end goal for them. Stephen Hernandez is the Chief Information Security Officer at Education. He says the high grade is a point of pride for the agency.
That FITARA score is a beacon of pride for us. And one of the driving factors of that score is our cybersecurity score, the FISMA score, Federal Information Security Modernization Act. It's the law we follow. And this year, I am just beaming with pride to say our team delivered the highest score we've ever seen. And it's really a journey because we started almost 7 years ago. That's about when I arrived. We had a solid F. On the FITARA scorecard, they're like, Ed, you got a lot of improvement. You got a lot of opportunity is how it was described to me. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. Today, we're going to be pulling out with not only the highest score we've ever had, but probably getting a solid A, maybe even an A+ on that security portion of the FITARA scorecard, which is then hopefully going to get us to the overall A in FITARA.
Yeah, what's driven that progress in your view? What are the steps that you took or the pieces that you put in place to move from where you were to where you are?
The secret sauce, everybody talks about, oh, it's people, it's process, it's technology. For us, it was the people. And I have to say that watching our team go from folks that they're coming in, they're doing their job great every day, but were they empowered? Were they engaged? And did they really embody that growth mindset of saying, we can always do a little bit better. And as long as we're better tomorrow than we were yesterday, we're winning. We're getting ahead.
Yeah.
And we started to develop that culture, not just in my own organization, but frankly, throughout the entire department. I've got strong partners in my co-CISOs throughout not only the government, but in my own department, like Devon Tyler, the FSA CISO. He and I are attached at the hip, and we couldn't do what we do in improving cyber without that partnership. But when I started at the department, there was a finding or a recommendation from the IG that basically said the CISOs don't get along. So one of the things I knew I had to do was help build that relationship, set that tone at the top and say, folks, we're going to play well together. And in some cases it was, we're not peers. We're the department and we're going to take that leadership role. We're going to make some hard decisions, but they're going to be informed decisions and folks are going to engage on those decisions. And through that process of both building trust and delivering iterative success, over 7 years, here we are.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because very seldom do these conversations about how you got from here that was not as desirable to here that is much more desirable, regardless of what the area of proficiency is in government, revolve around trust and relationships and all those kinds of things, and not the nuts and bolts and ones and zeros that are behind it.
That's just it. Zero trust doesn't live in this space.
Yeah, that's right. Where does zero trust live on your priority list right now, Steve?
Well, what a great topic. So shifting gears a little bit, it is still priority one for us at the department, and it's still priority one, frankly, across the federal government. So we were lucky early recipients of those TMF funds, and we excelled in delivery. We delivered on time. We met all of our objectives, and we even had a little bit left in the war chest, and we were able to work with that TMF board to say, hey, we have all this success. Can we continue to build on that over the next few years with some of these funds we have left? And the TMF looked at it and said, you all are a great investment. Let's do that. So we started with security orchestration and response, and we started with secure access service edge, kind of the foundation to intermediary levels of maturity. And then we grew rapidly, and now we're looking at things like software-defined networking. We're getting tighter integration into identity, credential, and access management. And then we're also growing into this idea of micro-segmentation. And I think one of the really cool things is it's always great to talk about security, and we're thwarting the attacker, imposing costs and consequences, and all this fun stuff. But then there's the reality of, are we being efficient and are we being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar? And like one of the things I'm excited about in this next journey is we're able to take very expensive private leased lines that connect our regional offices together and replace them with business commodity lines. The same thing any commercial company would use today, because zero trust says, foundationally, we don't trust the network. Why do we need an expensive secured line? We have the technology on top of that to secure it and protect it.
You're securing what goes over the lines instead of having to secure the lines themselves.
You got it. That's exactly it, Francis.
So you framed that TMF piece of it in an interesting way, I think. You talked about how the board said you guys are a good investment and so continue with what you're doing. How does that way of thinking about it inform the work that you're going to do versus an appropriations process where you get this much money for 1 year to do this job, and then next year you have to hope that you have whatever the next piece is, and so on? Do you think about how you then go about doing that work differently because of the way that you either get or already have, in the case that you just described, already have the money?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic because you really have to have a bimodal way of thinking, because these are two very different processes. Appropriations, we're talking what's your forecast in the next 2 years, and then you kind of hone in on it a little bit at a time. Where TMF, most folks' initial interaction with the TMF board is a Shark Tank. You're going in and they're going to drill you, and you got 10, 15 minutes to pitch that idea and get out and hopefully secure those funds. And the whole process going on from that is very similar. And so they're checking in monthly, quarterly, saying, hey, how are you doing? Just like the sharks do, how's my investment?
Yeah.
And they're looking at not only the ROI, but they're looking at what's your contract performance, what's your real deliveries against your set targets. And then as you're getting to the end, one of the things that the folks did right in TMF was say, this is multi-year money. And so you don't have the same pressures to say, oh, dear goodness, I need to spend all this before the end of the year, so I'm going to make some hasty decisions. Maybe not the best ones, but I'm going to do it. With TMF, it's like, no, I'm going to make the right decisions for the right reasons, because I can recover those funds and potentially, if TMS blesses it, use it next year out.
You tipped me to something in your role as honcho on the Chief Information Security Officers Council, in addition to the work that you do at education, about something that's coming in a couple of months. But before we get to that, what's the general tenor of conversation across the government as an enterprise in the CISO community right now?
Yeah, so it's very different than like when we're talking about TMF and even a few years ago what that environment was. It's a vastly different environment today, because back then we had $1 billion war chest in the TMF, and we had prioritization towards cybersecurity, and we had the cyber EO. We had a perfect coming together of all these different actions to say, let's really drive cybersecurity ahead 10 years, 20 years. Now it's different. We're under some pretty serious budget constraints. Our appropriators are looking at the budgets and saying, probably not a lot of new budget here, probably not new funds in the TMF. So how are we going to work that? Because OMB's still thinking, well, what could the next EO look like? What could the next MMO look like? How do we keep moving ahead? So for the CISOs, we're taking a hard look at, assuming no new funds or very little new funds, how are we going to optimize the people, the processes, and technologies to keep moving ahead? Maybe not as fast and as dramatic as we were before, but keep that growth mindset and saying, how are we a little bit better tomorrow than we were yesterday?
What should I watch for in the Zero Trust Data Security Guide that you tipped me about?
Well, folks have been waiting for this for almost 2 years now, and we're happy to say that October, we should be putting something out. And that is a product out of Memorandum 2209, which is our Zero Trust memo. And it was the first time ever that OMB challenged the CISO Council and the CDO Council to come together and say, let's tackle the data pillar of Zero Trust. And so we've had folks from across not only those councils, but the Privacy Council. We've had folks from our statistical community. We've, of course, had folks from the White House engaged. And we put together a robust guide that's going to talk about the role of data in Zero Trust and do a little bit of forecasting about the future in terms of where we expect that pillar to grow and evolve.
We have about 30 seconds left. What do you want people to do with that guide? And who do you want to do something with that guide?
It is written for the data people, and it's written for the cybersecurity people. I want the cybersecurity folks to pick it up and get a deeper appreciation and understanding of our partners in the data field. And I want those CDOs and their folks to do the same thing for the cyber. If we get that, we've won the day.
You can read more about the latest FITARA grades and more that Stephen and I discussed on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today, be right back. The new TV show, Better Contracting, Better Outcomes, is available on demand now at fedgovtoday.com. You'll learn from top executives at NASA, DoD, Social Security, and more, plus industry experts that are leading government-industry partnerships. Discover their strategies for improving acquisition efficiency, achieving mission success, and driving innovation through federal contracting. Better Contracting, Better Outcomes, presented by the National Contract Management Association. Watch anytime at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. I will see you then. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.